Alrighty, cool beans. We're live on YouTube then. That will do. Sweet, sweet. So how's the Bitcoin magazine life been, man?
Oh, it's been going good. Um, Getting into a routine every week with the live stream for FedWatch, and I would like to write more, but it's just really hard to find the time because writing actually takes longer than doing a live stream, because I have to edit it and rewrite, do drafts and all this stuff. So um, writing has fallen by the wayside, and I'm doing mostly just podcast stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, when you say writing, is it mostly your newsletter, or is a newsletter incorporated into like Bitcoin magazine stuff?
It's not. They were kind of looking at maybe incorporating my letter into some of their content, but it's just not big enough for them to be attracted to it. So,
Hey,
but
man,
yeah,
every
yeah,
day, progress every day.
yep.
All right, cool.
1% a day, they say, right? 1% a day.
Exactly. All right, we're gonna go live in 3, 2, 1. And we're gonna record to the cloud. Salutations, stackers and kin. You're listening to a boy named Sue. That's Mr. Sue to you, aka Phil Gibson, only on the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast network. Great to have you guys, and it's a pleasure to have our repeat guest, technically Ansel Lindner. If you aren't aware of him, he is, of course, over at Bitcoin Magazine, and I'll let him do his own plugs. But we're here to talk macro, geopolitics, Davos, Bitcoin, obviously, and just kind of state of the world and where things are going. So, Ansel, thanks again for meeting with me today. How are you doing, dude?
I'm doing well. It's rare to meet someone that wants to talk about Davos and this type of topic. So I'm psyched.
Yeah, well, I mean, being in Bitcoin, I think people are wise enough to really what's going on. So hopefully, I'm like huge Tom Longer fan. Like I'm like top tier patron, and so just getting in his Slack and being just bombarded with all of this signal, it might be hard for some people to keep up with all this stuff, but over time, just like we were talking off camera before here, like 1% of progress every day, it just kind of becomes like repetition and like a sixth sense, like, okay, I know like who these players are and what their goals are and how they think they're going to get there. So it's great, man. So you have been doing a little series that you started a couple weeks ago, and just kind of deep diving on these global institutions, Davos being one of them. And you also mentioned maybe you're going to hit into the IMF and all these other institutions. But I think it would be important to kind of go over just the basic of who Davos is and where they want to see things going, and how I believe, because I subscribe to the Luangan thesis of we have Fed tightening. There's a bifurcation in powers, and there's Team Fed and there's Team Davos. And I know that might be trite to some hearing that, but I mean, we're seeing for once in decades the Fed successfully tightening monetary policy, making that cheap credit expensive and not very doable for people that have just been so used to sucking off that tea of the state of easy money. And so I thought we would just kind of have a conversation and see, how those two forces are going head to head, and of course incorporate Bitcoin and where it fits in all of this. So if you want to start with who Davos is and just the bare bones, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Tom Luongo as well. We've had him on FedWatch a couple times there with Bitcoin Magazine, and I've been reading him for a very long time. We differ in a few things. Like I see Davos as kind of a byproduct of the Eurodollar system, and I think he sees Davos more as in control. So I think the conditions were just right to let the Davos crowd, which are the kind of globalist Marxists in the world, the conditions just were right for them to gain power over most of the international institutions and many of the high positions in governments around the world. And so, but when the Eurodollar system comes to an end, and maybe we go to a Bitcoin system after that, then I think just naturally the globalists go away. The Davos will go away. So that's kind of how I see it. But I do buy into his thesis on the Fed versus the ECB, or the Fed versus Davos. I think there is some, um, I don't know if to call it bad blood, but there is a fracture there between them. In the past, the Fed always coordinated what they did with the ECB. And now recently, they haven't been doing that. Also, they tried to get Lael Brainerd to take Powell's position, and she is one of these Davos friendly people. That was rejected. Also, they tried to get Sarah Bloom Raskin in as the vice chair or the head of supervision at the Fed, and that was rejected. They actually totally discredited her, and that was Loomis that did that. Senator Loomis, in one of the Senate committees that, you know, kind of vetted these new appointees to the Fed. So
one more reason to love her.
Yeah, one more reason. I mean, I think she's real good people, but I don't like the fact that they aren't going harder, driving a wedge between Bitcoin and altcoins. So
yeah, I think
anyway,
that's just got to be like a slow, gradual, like ease into a process. And I
yeah.
mean, this is somewhat off topic, but still relevant. Is the latest like legislation that she and Gillibrand passed? I think it was just like an attempt for them to show before midterms, like, hey, well, we Republicans with this new crazy crypto Bitcoin stuff can actually come to some sort of compromise. And so this is something to be taken seriously, and we're just gonna be serious adults and try to work together on this. So I think the strict bifurcation between Bitcoin and crypto and everything else, I think maybe this is Loomis's method of kind of slow rolling, easing them into it. Perhaps just a theory.
Yeah, that could be the case. And also, I mean, this wouldn't happen almost anywhere else, right? There are places, small countries, you know, small jurisdictions, little tax havens on islands in different places that are friendly to Bitcoin, but you don't see any major, like say G7 country that's as friendly to Bitcoin as the United States.
Yeah.
So I think that is a very big distinction. And it's in part to this Davos Fed split, because I think, like Tom Luongo has pointed out, the Fed and Wall Street, they're not really enemies of Bitcoin. They're capitalists, and they want to, you know, they will adopt whatever the market wants. And I mean, dang, that's a huge change for me, because for years and years, I thought that Wall Street was, you know, kind of corrupt, evil banksters out there that wanted to take over the world and all this stuff. And maybe they were when they were aligned with the globalists, but
exactly,
at deep down in their hearts, they are capitalists. And so that's where I see kind of this break between Davos and the Fed.
Yeah, it's all about incentives. Like, they were all in the global mob, and then
Yeah.
when the hegemony and power that they have over the rest of the world, the whole global monetary system, when that is at threat, because honestly, I think Davos's main goal with leveraging the Eurodollar system, which I would love for you to just kind of, you know, debrief what that is, but with the Eurodollar system, that affords Davos, or just, you know, anyone that can make offshore dollars, gives them more quote unquote money printing. And I subscribe to the deflationary thesis just as you, but again, that gives them the green flag to do more money printing than the Fed can, which explains fully why arguably since June of last year, Powell started, you know, crypto tightening, like stealth tightening with the reverse repo market of increasing the payout by 5 basis points. And so that's another, I mean, again, the mob works great until, you know, you step on like someone's toe. And that's exactly what you're seeing. It's a financial war beyond anything else.
Yeah, well, with the reverse repo, they kind of have to raise it because, you know, that goes along with the Fed funds rate.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to raise the reverse repo rate along with that, as well as the IOER, the interest on excess reserves. So those are going to be three things that get raised together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Eurodollar system, do you want me to go briefly through that?
Yeah. Is there any more that you want to just like debrief, like the history of Davos, who it is, and then we can maybe ease into the Eurodollar system?
Okay. Well, Davos was, it's a meeting by the World Economic Forum, And the World Economic Forum started as the European Management Forum, I believe, European Management Forum by Klaus Schwab back in 1971 or 1972. And he is a adherent to a very special Marxist that from South America that was all, his name is Camara, Father Camara, who is also the kind of spiritual leader of Paulo Freire, who has now become gospel in Western education, and is kind of the where a lot of this woke stuff came into education. And also he was the spiritual father of the Pope, the current Pope. And so these are three branches of society that were all formed by the teachings of this Father Camara out of South America. And it is a revolutionary Marxist idea. And so when you look at the World Economic Forum, you know, whatever they're pushing, you have to view it in the guise of Marxism and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I don't know how much more you want me to break it down.
That's fine. That's fantastic. I mean, at the end of the day, they are just like Tom says, they're commies. At the end of the day, they just have different tools of how they want to reach their communism. At the end of the day, they're just commies.
Yeah, I love that he just cuts to the chase and says they're commies. And yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, it's one of those things where I didn't really, probably if you rewind 4 or 5 years, I didn't at all understand that they were just Marxists that were hiding everywhere in all high up in all of these institutions. I thought that they were maybe like just corrupt neocons or something like that. But now
they're that too, but that's just another flavor of the communism.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, that's just that's just designed split. I mean, neocons and progressive Democrats are pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
Same with the people, the ruling class over there in Europe.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the Eurodollar system came up similar or same kind of time frame as the World Economic Forum and Davos, but they weren't really connected at the time. The Eurodollar system is, I mean, it sounds like euros and dollars, but it's really just a term for offshore dollar system, and it's bank centered. It's not central bank centered. So all the banks around the world, the way you print dollars is through the process of making a loan. You don't print dollars with QE. You don't print dollars with, government spending. You print dollars through the process of making a loan. And the U.S. government and the Fed can regulate U.S. banks, but they can't regulate banks in London or banks in Tokyo or banks in Frankfurt or whatever. And so these banks out overseas, they had dollars on their balance sheet and they made dollar denominated loans. And that is printing dollars. So
and just to cut in real quick, like the origin of why dollars were there in the first place was because there was like a surplus after World War II, right? Which they sent over there for like reconstruction after, everything was destroyed, essentially.
Well, yeah, that would be one source. I don't know exactly. I do know that they had subsidiaries. So like JP Morgan or whatever, a US bank would have a subsidiary in the city of London, and they would send them, say, $1 million. And now that subsidiary has that $1 million outside of the US jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and then they just pyramided on that. And you can see, well, it really picked up steam in the 60s and 70s. And one of the things about 1971, everybody in Bitcoin should be familiar with that, right? When we went off the gold standard. But really, it was almost like necessary, because if they're printing all these dollars, say in London, and they want to turn them into gold, right? They want to take these dollars that they just printed and they want to go turn it into gold. It doesn't work, right? The US government, the Fed, doesn't have control of the amount of dollars. These can be printed all over the world, and they were starting to turn them into gold. And so the gold would quickly leave the US, which it was starting to do. So it was almost a necessity to close that gold window, because the money was just being printed everywhere else, and we couldn't control it. So anyway, it evolved over the years and over the decades. to, involved in all these different financial products with derivatives, getting into the 2000s with credit default swaps and all of these, very highly leveraged, highly rehypothecated instruments. And it blew up in 2008. So now, instead of just unbridled lending and printing of dollars, now we have a collateral-based system. So collateral is extremely important. And to get a loan, you have to post collateral. So in the old days, maybe like going back to like 1990, instead of posting collateral, maybe you could create a credit default swap. So they would take this credit default swap as collateral for their loan, and they could still keep printing money. And really, this printing all around the world is what built up Japan up to 1990. And then it turned around and built up China from 1990 to 2010-ish, built up all these emerging markets. These are all just a product of unbridled credit in the world. But that had diminishing marginal returns. And then in 2008, when it blew up, now they have to post collateral. So what is the best collateral for these is U.S. government treasuries. And that is why there is, I consider treasuries money right now.
Yeah, like M1 probably.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're cash equivalents. So maybe even base
Zero?
money. Yeah, maybe even base money. But it's impossible to count how much money there is in the world because of all of these different products that they have different monetary attributes.
Yeah.
I mean, look at a treasury has different monetary attributes than a dollar in my wallet, or a reserve held at the central bank has a different monetary properties than a U.S. Treasury held in a private bank. And so there's all these different ways to calculate it. What are the weights that you would use in good times versus bad times? Because if there is, kind of a financial crisis brewing, then people aren't going, your credit or your collateral might not be as good as other people's collateral. And so how do you count the money? It's really impossible. And it's all due to being a credit-based system because there is no backing to these dollars out there. It's all just someone else's debt, right? Someone else's liability.
Yep.
So yeah, that's kind of sums up the Eurodollar system.
Yeah. Which kind of comes back to, why is the Fed tightening? Well, because there are so many dollars out there. And with these like Davosian policies of like build back better bills, where it's like $5-6 trillion and they front load most of it in like the first year and a half or so, that is going to destroy the credibility of a treasury. And so again, this is why I come back to like you've got Team Davos versus Team Fed, and Team Fed, the reason why they're going to tighten is to be, hey, we issue a lot of debt, but we want to be good on our promise. Like we're going to keep servicing the debt and probably keep rolling it over, but we're going to keep it at a reasonable extent to where we're not going to just QE infinity ourselves into oblivion. Otherwise, as Greg Foss always says, nations do default. And that's where this whole Davosian battle is, where you got the EU trying to destroy their economy economically. I haven't followed up with it today, but Christine Lagarde has probably announced that they are actually going to start tightening and removing assets off their balance sheet. But still, they need to really try to weaken the American economy first and have that crumble and leave the European economy standing. Davos does. And the Fed tightening is the way to combat that. And so I think it's interesting. I don't know if you've followed this thesis that Tom's come up with, but really instilling SOFR, it really officially this year, SOFR being this secure overnight funds rate, where now all of US based debt is indexed to American markets as opposed to LIBOR, which it was before. And I think LIBOR and the Eurodollar kind of go hand in hand because the Eurodollar's interest rate are based on whatever the 18 banks that meet in London essentially decided it is. And only one of those banks, JP Morgan, is representing American interest. And so, they were kind of the black sheep in that cabal, if you will. And I don't know, have you heard about like the whole like LIBOR versus SOFR kind of thing? And do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I haven't really done a big study on it, but I agree. I think SOFR was a split with the city of London in a way, right? So
Yeah.
the big money interests over there in London, and the Eurodollar system, yeah, that is where it got started, was in London, and that was the main headquarters for many decades. I don't know so much today whether you would count it as like the main headquarters of the Eurodollar system, but I think it was in the past, and I don't know. I don't I don't agree with the idea that QE is money printing and QT is tightening. So,
I think I
it,
would agree as well.
so I don't like the Fed raising rates. I don't think that, first off, I don't think it matters
Yeah, because that's
because,
not destroying the money.
yeah. And if they raise rates, or even if they do QT or whatever, the market, if the market goes against them, they can't literally move the market. They can't literally raise interest rates. If, say, the 5-year rate is at 2%, they can't raise the Fed funds rate to 2.5%. I mean, they could, but
Yeah.
they would look stupid doing it, and it would totally break the confidence that people have in this mythology of the Federal Reserve. So I think that the going forward, what's going to happen is we're sliding back into recession. And I kind of look at the Fed's um, monetary policy recently is less so political and more so of just saving face, because the market was rebounding, bonds were selling off, so they had room to tighten, and now they tightened, and the inflation was going high, and they're like, "Where's the Fed? Where's the Fed?" They printed so much money, so then they had to come in, and they're coming. They have room to make this hawkish narrative because rates have gone, yields have gone up so much. But once yields start falling again, they're not going to be able to continue this hawkish talk, and they will pivot.
What?
That
What?
that's
What?
yeah.
Actually, no. Finish up. Sorry.
That No, I was done. Go for it.
Why you mentioned that they'll maybe do a pause, and they
Mhm.
might not do QE, but again, maybe that pause is all they need. But why do you think that they won't
Yeah.
keep tightening? Because I mean, just you know, I believe in the thesis that this is do or die. You're right. They are saving face because they don't really have any other option. And so they don't give two shits what the markets do, because at the end of the day, they are preserving the money transmission mechanism that the Federal Reserve System wields over the rest of the world. And to maintain that, you have to strengthen the dollar, like markets be damned. Like, I know that sounds radical, but I mean, if there was any sense or possibility of a Paul Volcker 2.0, I think this is the extent that it has to go. You're never going to see like 20% Fed funds rate again, but I mean, I don't think that it has to be raised to 7% or like whatever. It will raise itself to whatever it needs to be. But I think that they're just serious about not uh holding up, and like for the next Fed funds meeting they'll just go like another 50 basis points, another 50 bips, another 50 bips until like they're
Yeah.
they're set. And especially if the savings rate is at as low as it is, I think 4%. I mean, that's a sure sign that they don't show any signs of stopping what they're doing. Whereas where it was like, whether it was during COVID like 8% or something, so up until savings rate actually doubles, they won't ease up on this. So maybe they'll keep doing this QT stuff until it'll suffice. And I feel like they can keep doing this because they have kind of going back to the reverse repo, or just the basic principle that money moves to where it's treated best. You're going to have capital flight out of Europe and everywhere else in the world. And maybe that substitutes the need for doing QE, because you have all of this excess liquidity of dollars flooding back, being invested into America. So if that's the case, like, why do we even need to do QE? I know that was kind of a
Yeah.
lot, but
Well, I mean, I think what you're missing is that there could be a credit collapse, and that's going to stop them. Because think about, in 2008, they
can't.
said we were
Okay.
24 hours from the entire financial system disappearing, and that was true. because it's a credit-based system. And what happens when everyone defaults? There's no money left. Literally, there's no money left. And when the repo rumble happened, and even in the Corona crash, there, like, US dollar treasuries were not posting as good collateral. You had to have like a 4-week treasury bill to have good collateral to access cash, so you wouldn't default on things and you wouldn't go
as
bankrupt.
a bank.
Yeah, as a bank. So this is a bank-centered system. And if the banks are frozen, the Fed must act. The Fed cannot keep raising rates if the entire banking system is about to explode. So I think that, and how is the Fed going to raise rates? Like, if they are going to, like I said, if the 5-year, even the 10-year, say, is at 2.5%, 3%, and they want to raise to 3.5%, the Fed funds rate, how are they going to do that? They literally don't have the power to raise it past where the market is. And so they are, and in a situation where they are causing an economic crisis, quote unquote, causing an economic crisis, interest rates will plunge, or not interest rates, but yields on treasuries will plunge, because people are rushing into the safest instruments, right? And so they're causing a situation right now where rates are going to plunge as they're trying to raise rates. And soon, and if they keep going like this, then there will be some sort of credit crisis, a credit collapse, and they must change. They will not let it go to zero. I'll guarantee you that.
So they're trying to raise the Fed funds rate, but then you said rates will collapse, meaning that, like, the treasury, like, payout, essentially.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So isn't that what they want? Because you want low yielding treasuries and high price bonds, because that is like a fiat maximalist tool for a store of value, is what a bond is, right? So if that's the case and bonds increase in value, doesn't that actually increase the value of your collateral?
I mean, yeah, you're increasing the value of the collateral, but it doesn't mean that people will take that collateral. So in a situation where,
so who's people in this case?
Oh, sorry, banks. So this is like money market funds, or people that are at the repo window. They're trying to access overnight capital. They will look at the person that's wanting to borrow, and they will say, well, I don't know if I can take that government bond, even though it's risk free. I don't know if I can take that 10-year and get the same price for it tomorrow. So I'm not going to accept that 10-year. I will accept only the 4-week or maybe the 2-month treasury note, or treasury bill, because those I can somewhat be guaranteed that tomorrow they'll be worth the same as they are today.
Right.
So,
but if rates on 10-year treasuries decrease, then that's what you want to have happen, and that's positive for anyone that holds collateral or bonds, because, like, I mean, I guess that's what happens when tightening occurs, right? And so this is going to keep occurring if the Fed funds rate is high, shouldn't it? Because if all that happens, that keeps happening, like, continues, I guess that was redundant. I mean, this is a positive for anyone that holds US collateral, isn't it? Because the value of that collateral increases, because this all goes back to strengthening the dollar and the credibility of the United States.
Well, right now that's good, but at the end of the day, you have to have dollars to pay your debts.
Yeah.
Right. You can't pay your debts with US treasuries. You can, if you take that treasury into the repo market and turn it into dollars, right? Overnight. And you can access capital overnight. So you can take these cash equivalents, turn them into real cash, and pay off your debts. But if in the system, if that whole system is broken down, those treasuries actually go to zero. I mean, if you'd mark them to market, I can't use them to access my cash. So really, they're no good to me. I need to switch them over to 4-week treasuries or whatever. So yeah, it's good to a degree. We will see rates going down as the economic situation deteriorates.
Rates as in on treasuries.
Correct. Yeah. The open market rate on treasuries will decrease as the economic situation deteriorates. But when that financial crisis happens and you have 24 hours to unfreeze the credit markets, the Fed will pivot. The Fed will change what they're doing. They will come to the rescue. They won't let it actually absolutely collapse to zero.
So do you think this can be offset with capital flight? Because if the dollar like strengthens even more and the euro collapses, whatever money that people have in whatever country, that investment is going to move to the United States. So do you think that flood of new capital, foreign capital, could possibly offset and make it so the Fed doesn't have to swoop in?
Yes, I think the Fed will,
because that would basically save face of you. We don't need to worry about this 24-hour crisis, wouldn't it? Potentially.
Yeah. I think the Fed will pause because the market rate of treasuries will make it so they can't raise anymore. And so once they pause, then that will be a huge risk on event. And there will be money flowing in from around the world into US markets, US dollar denominated assets, stocks, all of that, because it's a risk on event. So that's why where I see the capital flight into the US is not because,
I mean, how is it risk on? Shouldn't it be risk off? Because I mean, that capital is not going to go to risk on assets. It's going to go to assets that the market actually demands and needs, right?
If the Fed pauses, that is going to be an extremely dovish situation. If the Fed pauses, because they're so uberly hawkish right now, if they pause, the market is going to interpret that as, hey, the party's about to be back on.
Right. Oh yeah.
And if you look at this happened right in 2018 with Powell too. So right when Powell came into office, or whatever you call it there for the Fed chairman, they were raising rates. And then in December, well, I think they started talking a little bit more dovish in October. And the markets actually bottomed in, I think, September, October. And the stock market, it kept going up. And everyone's like, well, how is the stock market going up? Because the Fed's raising rates. But the market knew something. The market knew that the Fed was going to be forced to pause. And they paused in January of 2019. And the markets just kept going up. The markets called it early, and they kept going up. And then the Fed cut back in July of 2019 with the market still going up, the stock market still going up. So that's why I think it's a risk on event. It's a dovish pivot for the Fed, and it's going to be like, hey, the party's back on, and all that capital is going to come to the US. Now, that's very bad for Europe. I agree with Tom Luongo on this almost exactly about, Europe is going to have to break up. There's going to be probably internal wars within Europe again in the next 10, 20 years. There's going to be massive problems all around the world other than the United States. And I'm a big US bull because of this, that where else is capital going to go other than the United States markets? So that's why I'm a big bull of the dollar, and I'm a big bull of the US markets.
Yeah. I'm too. Like and even since learning about all this stuff in the past year, I'm much more bullish on even gold, because I think it's still just a realistic approach.
Yeah.
And even during the Trump administration, I've recently heard that they were considering, like Russia's doing, arguably, they have a commodity-backed currency.
Yeah.
And if you throw in gold and possibly Bitcoin, now with Lemus, up there on Capitol Hill, and now that you have, these commodities, and you have Russia, frankly, winning this war and doing so well, that for sure sends a clear signal to the United States, like, hey, we don't need to have proxy wars anymore, but this is financial war number 2, which, we're doing this ebb and flow thing, fighting Europe financially, but now, Russia's making us look bad. So let's take from the Russian playbook. We don't need to be like number 1 oil producer, but we can at least take notes on, having a commodity backed treasury. And I think Bitcoin and gold have a great slingshot advantage to do that, and that would further strengthen the dollar and the United States credibility as well.
Yeah. Well, you said a good thing there, that what did you say? Making us look silly. Russia's making us look or making us look bad. And I agree with that, but that not exactly, because the US could handle business. A lot of people think like, oh, the US is, like this aging empire, it's a declining empire, and now Russia and China, they're the ascendant empires and all this. But no, I mean, the US has more firepower than any country. It's just really hard to win a war maybe on someone's border, like on Russia's border. So it would be hard to do that. But the US could handle business if we wanted to. And so but that's the main kicker, is I think there's a loss of the public support for any sort of war like this. Yeah. There's a big shift happening in
especially
the US.
How we like embarrass ourselves when we pulled out of Afghanistan, I think.
Yeah, there's a big shift in the US. And I think it's been kind of bubbling up for maybe 10 years, but maybe since the financial crisis. Yeah. I don't know, the great financial crisis.
Like you're ex-military too, so I mean you have a great perspective and take on this because you were there seeing it.
Yeah, and I think that the US's heart and soul is non-interventionism, and that sounds funny for people because the US has had all these proxy wars. They've been in Afghanistan and Iraq for going on 2 decades, right? But it's really, if you look before World War II,
yeah,
the US was non-interventionist. We came in right at the end of World War I, and then World War II, it took Pearl Harbor to get us in. Yeah. Right? It's almost like they had to, maybe they tricked us to get in with a false flag. I don't know. But so it took a lot to get the US into World War II. And in our heart and soul, we are non-interventionists. I think that's coming back. So the US is pulling back. All of these other countries where the US had overwatch kind of on the international system, like NATO, the UN, the WTO, the WHO, all of these institutions are going to be losing relevance or going defunct pretty quickly. And that's very bad. I mean, it makes NATO look silly, this Russia situation. It makes Europe look really silly, but I don't really buy into that. It makes the US look all that silly. It's embarrassing.
So I just want to clarify, when I said Russia is making the United States look better, I meant economically, because if you're Russia, you're sitting on all the commodities that the world depends on. And so they make us look bad financially and credit worthiness, like just, grade F, because they're like, hey, you want this, pay us in rubles. And so I think that sends a sure signal of some pointers that the United States can take and saying, hey, you want treasuries? Well, they're backed by like gold and or Bitcoin. And I think this would be a great kickoff to the real hash war, because Russia has like the marginal cost of, creating energy. You're silly to think that they're not mining Bitcoin, right? And so I think with the announcement a month or so ago that Exxon's like looking into mining Bitcoin, I think that is just another signal, like, hey, if we're serious about this, we don't need to be messing around with proxy wars. I think that's another part of the bifurcation between Washington and others up on the hill or whatever. I think it all comes back to like working on credit worthiness and non-interventionism, as you say. And I think I think like the whole thing that is, it doesn't make NATO and all these institutions look good. I think I also subscribe to the Longan thesis of that's part of the Davos plan, is to get rid of NATO and all these institutions and create Europe's own foreign policy. That's kind of
with the European army and all that.
Yeah. It's kind of a tangent, but
well,
in some way it's just kind of this serendipitous, well, that's more of like a positive adjective, but it's just this kind of clumsy thing where they're doing all the wrong things and they're panicking, Davos is, and they're like, oh, well, these sanctions are making Russia stronger, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, it's still kind of embarrassing United States foreign policy and it's kind of getting them closer to their goals of disbanding NATO and creating their own European army, like foreign policy sort of thing. So like there's a lot of like nuance going on here, but I think ultimately what puts the United States in the best position is to again focus solely on monetary aspect and making this like the safest place for capital to move to.
Yeah, domestic conditions.
Yeah.
I think that the Russia situation points out the impotence of Davos. So everyone maybe Davos wanted to use intimidation and fear to get what they wanted, and they've been doing that for a long time, actually. To keep everybody in line with their goals, their ESG goals, their I guess LGBTQ or whatever, all these other goals that they have, and they've been trying to keep people in line, and they've been using this intimidation tactics. But India's not buying it anymore. China's not buying it anymore. Russia's definitely not buying it. And
everybody is siding like with Russia. Like honestly, you got India being the middleman for oil, and that's how Europe is getting their oil. Yeah, they're refining it and they're selling it to them, and then you got Hungary on the other side, trying to buy it from Russia, and then like create some other like market, and it just distorts like energy prices and it sends everything out of whack. So it's kind of like this creative destruction within Europe, and it's all just a consequence of just the failure of Davos and central planning.
Yeah, and what Davos could hold on to power if they had more runway in this credit-based system. That's what I think. So we are coming to the end of
which is why they are the proponents of MMT and CBDCs issued from IMF and central banks, and getting rid of the whole decentralized. I will say that because essentially that's what it is in America. It's a decentralized banking Federal Reserve system, and that is what separates the monetary power in America from the rest of the world, because they control that power. And so that credits that like it's MMT communism that Davos is wanting. That's why I think they're like larger proponents for that, which is again why I don't think the Fed will actually issue a CBDC. You had Leo Brainerd even come out today, and there was an article going around from CoinDesk, I think, but there was a meeting, and we covered this on News Made Simple this morning. There was a meeting that a bunch of credit unions and commercial banks got together, and they sent a letter to I forget, commissions on trade, something, whatever.
Yeah.
But essentially, like, this is like a dangerous thing, and I'll send you the link if you want. But like, this is dangerous for the Federal Reserve, and 71% of the private money that is created, like that's private money in the U.S., and that is the basis of the growth in this economy. When you have a CBDC issue, that is completely destroyed, and so that's just another like prime example why you've got Team Fed and Team Davos butting heads here.
Yeah. So if you rewind, say 20 years, there was still enough runway left in this debt system that they could have printed enough money to take on this Russian situation in a more effective way. But it's just a sign of the times. And I believe that all of these things are kind of naturally occurring. If somebody's coming to give you 0% interest on a loan and you can use it to expand your business, then you're going to take that. But if after a while, the debt burden gets too great, and maybe you've taken out too many loans and you don't want to take out another loan because you just can't pay off everything. And so eventually you come to the end of this credit-based system. And that's where we're at now. I think it's all natural. It's not like, I know Tom Longo is big on like conspiracy of the Davos crowd and the evil people at the top in this cabal, but I really don't think that. I think that it's people just following their own incentives, and it's kind of a natural ebb and flow of society. One of the things I've been saying is there's a pendulum swinging, and the pendulum has gone towards the Marxist globalists, and it's going to swing back again the other way. And we see this all around. So I feel like my position, at least, maybe I take it because it's optimistic and it keeps me from being depressed about all this stuff. But I think it's an optimistic view.
Yeah. I mean, everything that he kind of talks about, I think it's one of the more optimistic approaches, because really puts me in the dumps, because all people want to talk about on Bitcoin Twitter, at least, is just like doom porn, and whether it's like
Yeah.
CBDC or whatever. I feel like the whole like leftist approach Davos has been taking is just blowing up in their face, and so maybe they'll work towards more of a right leaning strategy, whether that's like working with neocons, or I don't know what really that looks like, but I don't know. I think that could even blow up in their face, because you have like more like quote unquote red states just standing up against this stuff. Like Florida, for example, that's a prime example. And then, if DeSantis runs in 2024 and he takes on someone like Tulsi Gabbard as like VP, it's just, you have like two people on the different sides of the aisle, but coming together just out of like rationality, and that no one's on board with this whole globalism thing that's going on. So
Yeah, that's funny.
I think, people are standing up, and like the truth is treason in the empire of lies, and they are just working based on just naturally, as you say, their natural like rational incentives of what they want to do for themselves and their families, and everybody in the nation wants to do the same thing. And so like that is the like glimmer of optimism I have, is just people. And that's why I'm like really bullish on people and Bitcoiners. But like Bitcoin is going to be a major piece in this. It's not going to be the only piece, but it just, with things like Bitcoin and just like the soundness of reality, is kind of pulling people out of this doom porn thing and making them actually stand up and doing everything they can to make things better and correct.
Yeah, it's funny that when Tom started talking about that Tulsi Gabbard thing, I had just mentioned, I remember the first time I heard Tom say that, I had just talked to my father-in-law. I said, who would be a great running mate for Ron DeSantis is Tulsi Gabbard, because that would bridge the divide of these parties and it would be like an unstoppable duo. I totally agree with that. And they kind of symbolize a turning, the pendulum swinging back, and towards nationalism, towards non-interventionism, towards populism. Yeah. And the way they demonized Trump, and the way they demonize like Orban over there in Hungary, and the way they demonize Putin, these are all populist leaders.
Yeah.
They are all anti-globalists. And that just, it's a perfect example. I mean, that should be super, super clear for people. Look, Trump and Putin, they're populist. Yeah. That's what the globalists hate. And then the people should be like, oh man, yeah, that's right. That's why we're told to cancel all of these Trump people, just like we're told to cancel Russia when Russia invades Ukraine. It's the exact same playbook, just on maybe a different scale. So
yeah, no, at the end of the day, it's not to actually to fall back in the quote unquote conspiracy, but it is a global cabal, because that's all these people know, because they're commies. And anything that goes against that agenda, they want to exterminate. And again, the natural incentive of people is, I like at the way it scales out, it yields nationalism. But I think that is just the product of individuals, and just in the proximity of like whatever piece of land on the globe that they live on. And that's kind of like what the default would be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still pretty positive about it. I mean, if I were in another place in this world, like maybe if I lived in a third world country somewhere that was just starting to get its feet under it, be an emerging market, I would be really worried about this situation, because I think the emerging markets are going to be completely decimated by this. Africa, I think, is going to be decimated. All the progress that was made over, let's say, the last 20 to 40 years or something in some of these developing markets, it's now going to be totally reversed within a matter of 10, probably. So the end of this dollar system and the end of globalism is not going to be very friendly to most places in the world. Yeah. But since I am sitting here in Florida, I mean, I have to stay positive. So, and well,
yeah, go ahead. This is, well, let's not forget for the listeners, this is a Bitcoin podcast. And so we have Bitcoin. And I mean, that's a ripe opportunity for third world countries, whatever. I mean, El Salvador is doing whatever El Salvador is doing. and we still don't know what that meeting with Bukele and the other 40 people representing like 40 other nations, what that's going to yield. So I mean, people are wising up, and again, people are standing up for whatever they believe in, whether it's their families or their country, municipality. They're not on board with this globalism, and they're not, and they are looking at Bitcoin as a safe haven to just skirt that. And so,
yeah, but I think there's a danger of a few narratives in Bitcoin. I think there's a danger in the inflation narrative, and there's a danger in Bitcoin being like global money, because it's almost like a globalist type of talking point.
Yes,
that Bitcoin is for the world and all this stuff. So no, I think Bitcoin is a safe haven. It will benefit the same way the dollar will benefit from the situations that we talked about earlier. So I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. I'm also bullish on gold, like you said, but I'm maybe gold will double where Bitcoin will go up 10x. Yeah. So that's a big difference. But I think we need to be careful about certain narratives in Bitcoin. And I've been trying to fight the good fight against the inflationists. But
let's just get into that a little bit, because I mean, we're deflation maximalists. Actually, I renamed my Twitter. It's Phil Gibson, cry harder QT maximalist. So that's where I stand right now.
Yeah. So inflation, deflation. The end of a credit cycle, it always ends in deflation, and we can't escape that. It'll happen again. The only way you can kick it down the road is what the Fed has been doing with QE, and that is just like balance sheet magic. They can just kind of tweak the balance sheets, replace some of these bad assets with reserves, right? And so they can tweak the balance sheets to extend this scheme a little bit longer.
Roll it over. We're never going to actually pay it off. We're going to keep servicing it. People are going to get their payouts on their treasuries, whatever. Everything's Gucci, but we're never going to pay it back. Just roll it over, keep kicking the can.
But the longer you do that, the lower growth you end up having because of that debt burden. The debt burden keeps picking up, and there is more contagion in the system. There is more just lack of confidence, the counterparty risk, all of this stuff. And so growth just keeps grinding down lower and lower and lower, and until something breaks. And what I think is going to happen is people are going to, what I hope happens is that there is an alternative, and that alternative is Bitcoin. So as the system continues to grind lower and people see, oh, this inflation scare that we've had, it was transitory actually. And we're going back to zero inflation and zero growth. And that's all we have to look forward to for our kids and our grandkids. And they're going to start shifting to a new system. So El Salvador, yes, is paving the way. And I think there will be more countries like that. But I think the US will actually be one of the first major countries to back the dollar by Bitcoin, or at least maybe add Bitcoin to its reserves or something like that. So that's my take on the inflation deflation stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
one more thing. The reason why it's dangerous to talk about inflation so much and how Bitcoin is an inflation hedge is because we're not going to get inflation. And so why aren't
we going to get inflation, Ansel?
Because just what I just talked about, the diminishing marginal returns on debt, you have to have growth to get inflation in a debt-based system, and we're not going to get it. So you're just going to keep kicking the can down the road, grinding down lower and lower with diminishing marginal returns. And that's all you have to look forward to.
You mean real growth, because the printing is destroying the actual value.
No.
So explain the diminishing marginal returns.
Okay, so the first loan I get for if I'm a big company, right, and I'm expanding my business, I'll get $1 million loan and I'll expand my business. Okay. The next $1 million loan I get, it will go towards the next best option for me, right? The next best expansion. And then if I get the third $1 million loan, it'll go towards the next best expansion. So each time you take a loan, you're actually getting the next best thing. You're not getting as much growth from it. And so if you take that to the entire economy and you make it trillions of dollars, right? The 20th trillion that you expand, you're going to get less growth than the first trillion. I guarantee you that. And so you just continue to go on and on and on. You can kick the can down the road by changing these assets to reserves held at the Fed, but that doesn't help you grow. So it doesn't help you get back a dynamic economy. You have to liquidate that debt. The problem in a credit-based system is if you try to liquidate the debt, you actually destroy money, because since money is debt, it's a credit-based system. You're destroying money at the same rate that you're trying to, get this.
You destroy money by meaning, when you say destroy money, that means you destroy the value of the money. Because when you liquidate that debt, there's more money out in the economy, but more money doesn't create more stuff. It just diminishes the value of the dollar.
There's not more money in the economy. So when you make a loan, that money is poofed into existence, right?
Right. Yeah.
And when that debt is defaulted on, that money disappears from existence.
Right.
So there's not actually more money out there in the economy. And I walked through this on one of my on a tweet thread when somebody asked me this, because I was like, yeah, that I need to explain that more. So actually, the way it works is that and
I'm doing like a chapter by chapter review of The Creature from Jekyll Island too with a buddy on the podcast. So this is going to be a nice addition to this. So sorry, go for it.
So the loan, when you print, when you make a loan, you print that money, but you also create an asset, right? You create the loan, and that loan is an asset for the bank
because they earn interest, and that's how they keep business.
Yeah, and they can sell that loan. They can that loan is an asset for that bank. It's on their balance sheet as an asset, and when you don't repay that loan, what happens to that asset? The bank's balance sheet loses an asset. So now they have fewer assets than liabilities. They need to call in some loans or make fewer loans in the future, right? So the way that this money destruction mechanism works is simply through the balance sheet of the bank. If I don't pay my debt, or if I default on my loan, then the bank has to not print as many liabilities because their asset side of the balance sheet has been depreciated. So that's how it works. And there's going to be, in good times, there's going to be more loans created and more money printed. In bad times, there's going to be fewer loans created and there's going to be more defaults, and that money is going to be extracted from the economy. And so it's a very elastic system. But there's the Fed, the QE, the government spending, none of that is actually money printing.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. I feel like I was going to say something else here, but I think we covered enough for people to, chew on over the weekend. But
yeah, this was great, man. It's very rare that you get someone to talk about this stuff. You are a Tom Luongo disciple, so you are right in this wheelhouse. And yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. I like to. We got your Misesians, Hoppians, Rothbardians, but what about the Luongans? I want his face on his Twitter silhouetted and put on mugs.
Yeah, you bring up the Mises and Rothbard. I'm one of their disciples too. I think that they.
Everyone in Bitcoin probably is to an extent if you've been in here long enough.
But what I think their kind of blind spot was that it's 100% credit. There is nothing to default to, and so if you let the credit collapse happen without kicking the can, you can actually go to zero, and that would be extremely bad for everyone, even if you own Bitcoin, because even if you own gold and silver, it's going to create a situation where bullets are more valuable than your Bitcoin or your bullion. So you can't just let it collapse.
You're arguing Misesians are saying what exactly?
They're saying that they should let the credit cycle run its course and let everything reset naturally. There should be no bailouts. There should be no QE from the Fed. There should be none of that stuff.
Right.
But if that were the case, we would seriously go to Mad Max. Now, that wouldn't be the case back when Mises was alive. because we had gold. Gold actually backed the dollar. But now we don't have gold. We have nothing. Nothing backs the dollar. So in the old days, if everyone defaulted, you'd still have the dollars there, or you still would have the gold there. But now, if the dollar collapses and we have a credit collapse, there is nothing to back it. It will literally go to zero, and we will have a Mad Max scenario. So that's what I kind of think Mises and Rothbard at least didn't explain too well, is what a pure credit-based system would look like. But maybe that's the next generation of Austrians. They'll explain.
I
that.
mean, they're just Bitcoiners, and so the
yep.
and so the Mises Institute, we have the Nakamoto Institute. Shout out Bitsine and Pierre.
Yep.
But I mean, again, this is the first time that we're living with a digital commodity money. Not more can be made. You're gonna have layers. I'm in the camp that you're not just gonna have Lightning Network, you're gonna have other stuff on it, and markets are based on trust, so you will always have counterparty risk of some sort. But the Misesian principle still stands, that things, just like in the wildcat banking era, you had banks that were successful and you had other ones that bust, and those booms and busts send market signals and tell people what they should and should not do in their business practices and their money. And so I think Bitcoin really changes everything here. But other than that, Ansel, this was awesome. I appreciate your time, and just let people know where they can find you so they can go sign up to your newsletter too. And Bitcoin Magazine can just have you be their feature thought expert.
Well, yeah, I do the live stream of FedWatch on Tuesdays at 3 p.m. with Bitcoin Magazine. I am the contrarian Bitcoiner, kind of, because these ideas aren't shared out there with most Bitcoiners.
Not just money printing people, like grow up.
Yeah. And I do a newsletter on Fridays through my website, bitcoinandmarkets.com. It's been going for about 4 years now. Every Friday, I put out about a 10-minute read or so of all, like, many of the important stories from different sectors in Bitcoin, from mining, price, just my basic market commentary. I even slip in altcoins every now and then, and CBDC stuff. So that's at bitcoinandmarkets.com. And you can follow me on Twitter at Ansel Lindner. Appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Yeah, man. Love it, dude. Be safe.
All right. See ya.